This is an ABC News Yahoo News live stream, the Republican National Convention. Live from Tampa, Florida, here are Amy Walter and Rick Klein.
Hello and welcome to Tampa. We are live again at the Tampa Bay Times Forum. Behind us, of course, lots and lots of delegates who are here for day 3 of the National Convention for the Republican Party. We are here for every minute of tonight's speeches, and we've got a lot to catch up on.
That's right. We're going to dip into the speeches as the night goes on. If you want to watch the speeches in the entirety, you can check us out at the ABC News iPad application. We'll have that live stream up in addition to our live stream. We want you to tweet us. We want you to be part of this conversation. The hashtag is #2012GOP. You can catch us on Twitter at Rick Klein and at Amy Walter. And Amy, this convention a little bit delayed at the start. The weather still hanging over it, so we want to get right to our meteorologist, Ginger Z, who is on the ground in Gulfport, Mississippi, with the very latest. Ginger?
Amy and Rick, this is pretty much it. This is what we've been dealing with. A little less wind right now, but just torrential rains, nonstop, relentless. That's what we'll call now Tropical Storm Isaac. It has been downgraded throughout the day today, but I'm telling you, today was absolutely the worst day we saw here in Gulfport. We had gusts upward of 70 miles per hour, tornado warnings almost all day, flash flood warnings. There were 2 reported tornadoes. We heard of damage to a construction site, also a roof off of a building. Those still have to be confirmed, but there were definitely some strong enough winds to take down some debris. Let me tell you about some of the other things we saw. We drove around, or tried to, and hundreds of roads are now closed throughout Mississippi, including Highway 90, which is what I'm standing in front of. It is still shut down in a lot of places. The curfew from dusk to dawn goes on for places like New Orleans and others, as this storm is going to move so slowly. It's right now just south of Baton Rouge. It's going to move slowly to the north, and the next step for it is to make its way into Arkansas by late tomorrow, then eventually into Missouri and the Ohio Valley by the weekend. Either way, it is going to continue bringing with it these heavy, heavy rains. The top rains here, officially 9 inches, but we've seen standing water up to our thighs easily. I was walking by in my waders, and a mailbox was right here, covered almost completely to the top. So we've seen a whole lot of flooding, and will continue to do so as Isaac makes its very slow exit.
All right, thank you so much, Ginger Z, down in Gulfport, Mississippi. Ginger, of course, showing the images that Republicans are hoping not to see very much more of. We're back on track here at the convention. It is the 3rd day, actually only the 2nd night. It was supposed to be the 3rd night, as we all know. And they've got a lot to get through tonight, Amy, all building up to the big one, which is Paul Ryan tonight.
Of course, and he was earlier today. We captured him walking through, going up to the podium, getting a feel for this. This is a guy who's been in the spotlight a great deal in his political career, but this is obviously the biggest night of his life. Looks like he's getting a little comfortable up there, taking a sip of water, catching his breath, and getting ready to go. He brought a lot of members of his family down here who will be watching tonight in the special VIP box. And we also want to talk about all of the different speakers that we have coming up tonight. There's Marco Rubio, of course, who's coming up on Thursday. That is another Tea Party member that is going to be very well received by the hometown crowd, I have no doubt.
And did you say Tea Party? We've got a video tribute for Ron Paul. We have a speech by Senator Rand Paul, of course, picking up that Paul mantle. We've also got John McCain. We've got Condoleezza Rice. We don't have any of the Bushes, but we'll see Jeb Bush tomorrow night. Of course, Paul Ryan is the big headliner, and as you know, Amy, he's given speeches before. None quite like this. He's used to the PowerPoint presentation. We're not gonna see. This isn't a budget talk. This isn't about the dire fiscal warnings. This isn't about the impending debt crisis. This is about something much different. It's got to be his own biography, also Mitt Romney's.
Well, you know, the thing is, he's had 3 weeks now on the trail with Mitt Romney to talk in a very different way than he does in Congress, and I think he's done it very well. I mean, when you see him out there, you can see him connecting with the audience. He makes Mitt Romney feel a lot more comfortable. He has his young family out there with him. I mean, you can just feel how much energy Paul Ryan added onto the ticket. So we'll definitely get to see that, and as we mentioned earlier, a great number of speakers who will also be carrying and talking about throughout the night. I want to make sure that we check in with our colleague, ABC News anchor, David Muir, who is once again down on the floor. And David, tell us a little bit about what the expectations are for tonight, especially in terms of not just Paul Ryan telling his story, but Paul Ryan telling Mitt Romney's story.
Well, I can tell you one of the key hints here, it's sort of quiet here, they just did the Star-Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, so folks here have their hands to their hearts still. But on the wall off in the distance there, they've changed the words. Last night it was, we built that, and tonight it says, we can change it. And that's a strong hint as to what we're going to hear from Paul Ryan tonight. As you know, Paul Ryan within the political world is already known as a congressman who has talked about fiscal responsibility, about what we need to do to get the deficit down. He has his own budget that now has been poured over now that he's on a national ticket. And on stage here tonight, his job really is going to be to tell the American people it's tough going ahead, but we have the solution. He's expected to begin outlining Mitt Romney's solutions for the middle class in this agenda, but he has to do that while also sort of introducing himself to the American people. We all know him because we've been covering him now for several weeks with very high scrutiny now that he's on the ticket. But it was much like last night, Ann Romney. Many of us know her. We watched her for years. I covered her back in Massachusetts when I used to be a reporter there. But last night was her chance to really introduce herself on the national stage. People here in the hall last night, the lights went down. She came out and they were on their feet. There were several standing ovations for her, and then for Chris Christie. It was a tough act to follow after Mrs. Romney, because she really, for the people in this convention hall, she really met expectations and soared past them. Very interesting to be out in Florida today, here in the Tampa area, talking to many of the voters here in the swing state, women voters, who she was really trying to appeal to last night to ask how they received her speech, and really it was quite mixed. Many said that she did very well. Some said it didn't sway their opinion. One woman said, you know, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm all of those things that she said, but she didn't connect to that particular woman. She said her mind is made up. But on the other hand, I heard from a woman who said, you know what, she helped make my mind. She did sway it for me, and on that key hurdle of making her husband more likable, more personable, she said she accomplished that here last night. So a different set of goals for Paul Ryan, because he'll have to talk about fiscal responsibility, the tough road ahead with this economy, but that's why he's on this ticket. Mitt Romney, many people said, made a very bold choice in putting him on the ticket, a choice that said there's a tough road ahead, but we are the ticket to accomplish that, and I think we'll begin to hear that storyline emerge here tonight, Amy and Rick.
David, I'm interested in your take on another one of the headliners last night, Governor Chris Christie, of course, the convention keynoter. A lot of people focused on the reaction of the Romneys in the box. It took Chris Christie a long time to even get around to mentioning Mitt Romney. How did the Romneys themselves and the Romney campaign react to the keynoter last night?
Yeah, you know, we reached out to the Romney camp not only last night right afterward, but today, and they insist that not only did they know what Governor Christie was going to say, but that he delivered exactly what it is they thought he would. Red meat for the crowd inside this convention hall. They wanted to be riled up, and the campaign believed that Chris Christie was the man to do that. But as you know, on Good Morning America this morning, and many other news outlets did a similar thing in timing, how long it was before he actually uttered the candidate's name. He talked about himself and his own accomplishments in New Jersey, but it was 17 minutes in before we actually heard Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, their names, the national ticket, of course. But, you know, I also think he came under heavier scrutiny because he came after Ann Romney, and she had such a star performance for the people inside this room. It was such a different speech that when he came out, it was sort of almost through a different lens that we looked at him. But, you know, he said today that Ann Romney went first. She talked about Mitt Romney. She made the case for Mitt Romney. He said she sort of cleared the way for me to come out and talk about why we as a Republican Party need to take back the White House, need to get this country into fiscal order, and that there's a tough road ahead. So he defended sort of how long it took before he got there. But one thing that's interesting, Rick, we didn't have a chance to get to this on World News tonight, but you know, when we saw those cutaways of Mitt Romney and Ann Romney over here side by side in that sort of double box, as we call it in TV lingo, sort of looking tired, well, the campaign said that's exactly what he was. He was tired. You know, he was watching. He was emotionally drained. His wife had just survived the speech of her life. And not to read anything more into it other than someone sitting in the audience relieved for his wife and watching the convention finally underway.
All right, David Muir, our man on the floor today, our man on the Romney campaign, thank you for your reporting. It is such a pleasure to have you with us. All right, we're going to bring in now our first guest of the evening. It is the former Speaker of the House, a man who, under another set of circumstances, may have been on that stage right behind us. Here it is, Newt Gingrich. Thank you, Mr. Gingrich.
Good to be with you.
So I just have to ask at the start, as you walk in to this convention, now we're in the middle of it, do you have a sense of how you would have done things if it had been your convention? You've been looking much at this?
No, I don't spend much time on that. This is my 8th convention, and starting with my very first convention in 1984, I had a program, a workshop, We worked it out with the Romney folks. We've done Newt University all week. I'm pretty happy. Clifton and I tomorrow night are presenting a recognition of Ronald Reagan, which fits a movie we did a couple years ago. So we're both pretty happy with that. And, I'd like to have been the nominee. I probably would have had a slightly different convention, but I think they're doing a good job, and I'm here to support Mitt Romney.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Paul Ryan. You've had, talked certainly at great length about, especially about his plan on Medicare. There's still a split among Republicans that we talk to about how difficult this issue is for Republicans to get on the offense on, especially for House Republicans. Still very nervous about it. You've been there. You've been in the House. Yeah. You know what those campaigns look like. You know how nervous some of them get about those issues.
They shouldn't be. This is easy.
How is it easy?
Well, first of all, Ryan listened carefully and went back and worked with Ron Wyden, who's a Democrat from Oregon, and the only bipartisan plan to reform Medicare is the Ryan Wyden plan. So he's got a very defensible, unlike the president, he actually is trying to do something. Second, poll came out this morning. By 45 to 42, the country now trusts Romney more than Obama on Medicare. Now, there's not a Democrat in the country who would have told you 2 weeks ago we could pull that off. I led the House in 1996 in reforming Medicare. We spent a year educating our members. We did not suffer any losses in 1996 from the Medicare issue. I think you're going to find in the next few weeks that we're going to be on offense on Medicare. We're going to first of all say, if you're over 55, nothing will be hurt. And by the way, we're returning the $716 billion that Obama took away from you. If you're under 55, you're going to have choices, including the current system. Tell me what the other side's solution is. And the Democrats get to explain that being totally dishonest and totally irresponsible is a reasonable ground for re-election.
Well, how do you get it back? You're an ideas guy. You love big ideas. You love policy. And in fact, you talked about if you had been the nominee, you would have challenged the president to these Lincoln Douglas-style debates around the country. That certainly would have brought some substance here. How does the Romney-Ryan campaign get this back on the substance, on the policy, certainly the substance they want to be talking about?
Fact is, they've got to fight their way past you guys. Because the media has a passionate desire to avoid substance for a lot of different reasons, some technical, some ideological.
Well, we're easy to fight past, but how do you make that happen?
No, you do by pure brute repetition. Romney has, for example, as the first plank of his plan for middle-class prosperity, an American energy independence plan. Last week he unveiled the American Energy Independence Plan. It's a good plan. We did 2 hours on it today at newtuniversity.com. Now they got to come back day after day, talk about it. It turns out, Kellyanne Conway just did a poll, this is like a 70-20 issue in our favor. I mean, people would like American energy independence. People are tired of American presidents bowing to Saudi kings. It's that simple. On Medicare, they have to routinely tell the truth. They have to train all of their surrogates to tell the truth. And then we have to run a full court press in the Jim Wooden UCLA tradition. Of every time the Democrats, every time Biden goes out and says something dishonest, we have to be right on top of him the next 3 minutes. And every time the president says something dishonest, we have to be on top. We have to learn to tell the truth better than they can tell lies. It's that simple. And then every day we got to figure out how to get you all back to covering real issues. So when you ask us about something nonsensical, which is the absolute nature of the business, you got to go back and say, all right, let's tell you what we want to talk about.
Well, we wanted you to do something substantive before you leave here. We have in front of us an iPad that we are asking all our guests to sign in on. Write us a little doodle, a little message, a little drawing.
You're a good doodler, as I recall. I also have a couple people who drew their home state.
That's impressive.
That's very impressive.
Just with your finger, right?
Just with your finger. Very, very simple.
Okay.
All right. Anything that you want? You do it. I don't want to pressure you to be able to do.
All right, and as Mr. Speaker, we thank you so much for being with us. We know that you're an excellent artist in addition to an intellectual
artist.
And a thinker and all the rest. Thank you so much.
That is perfect, you guys. This is what America means to him. Look at this, a love letter to America.
Oh, that's
from
lovely.
Newt Gingrich. I love it.
And we can report that Callista Gingrich is in the house, so she's okay with this.
You're okay with this, right?
That's what I give.
Or is that's also for her?
That's what I give her at Valentine's Day.
Oh, that's very sweet.
You do?
You get away with that?
You draw this and America.
You're right, Callista under it.
All right. America. There's a tip for everyone out there. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Very much for being here.
Great fun.
Thank you. We want to know about the stage setup. That was very great. But this is Ted Cruz from Texas, the Texas Republican Senate nominee.
And Princeton graduate, we should mention.
Indeed. Well, thanks.
Thanks. I'm really glad that you came. Thank you so much for coming up.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, just one question we've all been asking. Last night, you went out there without a podium, stood in the round, and walked to give your speech. That was your idea?
It was, and look, I've never been a fan of podiums because they get in the way of talking to people. And what I like to do is just try as much as possible to connect with people and talk directly.
Even with 20,000 people?
Oh yeah, it's invigorating. I mean, you draw excitement and energy from the crowd, and I mean, this crowd, the excitement here is just palpable.
Tell me what is animating this crowd? Because I've been talking to a lot of folks. I'm not convinced personally that it's Mitt Romney that's animating them. I think they're animated by beating President Obama, by the issues that are being brought up by Mitt Romney, but I don't see that connection yet. Do you?
What I think is animating this crowd is a sense that this nation is in crisis and a love of liberty, a desire to stand up and fight for liberty.
When you're out there talking to voters, and especially when you're talking to Latino voters, there seems to be this desire by the Republican Party to say we need to get them, we need to communicate them, we have these great candidates, and yet somewhere there's the disconnect between the candidates and then the voters with the party. How are you going to be that bridge between the Republican Party and the voters who right now keep pulling the lever for Democrats?
Well, look, the views of the voters change, and the views of Hispanic voters change. I think the values of the Hispanic community are profoundly conservative values. I mean, the values that resonate in our community are faith, family, patriotism. One thing a lot of people don't know, Hispanics have a higher rate of military enlistment than any demographic in this country.
And I think this is very true. We hear that a lot, but it seems like though there's a disconnect because there's the threshold issue here of immigration, right? Do you believe that if Hispanic voters felt as if Republicans crossed that threshold, then you could connect on those other issues where you have...
I don't think that's right. I think that Democrats very much hope immigration will be a wedge issue, and they're using it to try to scare the Hispanic community. But I don't think that is the impediment. Most Hispanics are not for open borders. Most Hispanics are not for blanket amnesty. I think it is the Democratic Party cynically trying to scare those in the Hispanic community. And I agree, Republicans need to do a better job communicating our values. It wasn't too long ago that George W. Bush in 2004 got 44% of the Hispanic vote nationwide. And if we do a better job of communicating that the conservative values of the Republican Party are precisely the values that the Hispanic community shares and believes, I think that is the key to improving how Republicans do with Hispanics.
So if and when you get to Washington, and obviously you're quite favored in Texas, have you thought about Mitch McConnell? Are you going to support him for majority leader? Have you thought about who you plan to align yourself with in building some new coalitions?
Well, from the beginning of the campaign, I have consistently said that I'm not going to make any commitments on potential leadership votes, that I think it'd be presumptuous for me to do that unless and until I'm elected to the Senate. My focus is we've got 68 days till the election in November, and I'm spending every day crisscrossing the state of Texas, making the case to the voters of Texas that there's a fundamental choice, and it's the same choice in the Texas Senate race that the nation faces in the presidential race, a choice between going down the road of the Obama Democrats, more and more spending, more and more debt, more government control of the economy in our lives, versus getting back to our founding principles, limited government, free markets, individual responsibility.
All right, Ted Cruz, the Republican Senate candidate from Texas last night. Star, we want you to sign in on our iPad. We're asking everyone to do a little finger doodle.
It's a virtual guest book, and we've had all kinds of doodles that came in. What this convention means to you, your home state, all those sorts of things. Give us a real sense of who you are, and again, you got the Princeton reference in. Well, every time he gets that in.
I'm sorry, it's just a biographical fact, and I think it is worth mentioning. But we do appreciate. We know you've had a very tight schedule, so we appreciate you joining us here. Amy, I think we're going to have to give some kind of a prize for the most creative, if nothing else.
All right.
All right. Here we got it. Always stand for liberty. There we have
it.
That's pretty
good. That's pretty good. Next time, we're going to have to make the Statue of Liberty. All right. So. You can improve a little bit, but that's pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you what. My 4-year-old would really enjoy that.
You can bring your 4-year-old on anytime.
Ted
Cruz,
thank you very much.
Sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Really, really, really.
And as you know, Amy, Ted Cruz, part of this a growing band of young potential senators joining a growing caucus of very strong fiscal conservatives. You know, it used to be that it took a long time to make a mark in the Senate, and it doesn't feel that way anymore. Now you have people who are senators-elect, like when Barack Obama was a senator-elect, and then Ted Cruz favored to join the Senate as well, who becomes superstars.
And who get a chance to speak in prime time in front of all of these convention goers. And again, you know, we really are talking about a youth movement, and I think this is something we're going to talk about a lot even after this convention, the deep bench that Republicans have. They have young women, Hispanics coming into the Senate, governorships. This is a deep, deep, deep bench.
And there is that Paul Ryan guy that we're going to hear from tonight.
There's that guy. You know, the other fun thing we get to do here on our show is give you some flashbacks to what life was like at other conventions. And some of those are conventions that you and I may have attended. Some of them are just a teeny bit ahead of our time. So why don't we take a look at this convention nugget from one that, well, nobody here in the room actually attended.
All right, so Youth Movement 1856 was our convention. How about that?
Yes, you know, I'm sure that maybe a couple folks down there remember those good old days. But so we're really excited to have with us right now the governor of Wisconsin, who's also up on that podium.
That's right.
Last night, Scott Walker.
And in fact, I can see my seat right there. You can see a cheesehead right over the corner there.
Is that how you're holding your seat?
That is.
Isn't that good?
That is
not hard to miss a cheesehead.
Except for in this crowd, I think there are going to be a lot of cheeseheads tonight, right?
There are indeed. With Paul Ryan, certainly with Reince Priebus, even as the national chair. But tonight, I think everybody's going to be a cheesehead.
All right, so I have two questions. The first is more of a personal one, and then we're going to get to the substantive one. But can you tell us what it's like to walk out on a podium, up to a podium like that? You've been on national television. You've been on the national stage. Is this really scary, invigorating? What does it feel like, and how different does it feel?
It's a little surreal. I mean, you come on out, and actually right before you go out, you kind of take that breath. My dad was a preacher, so when my brother and I were young, we used to literally come on out, and we would. My dad, you never knew, even when we were young, we'd have to lead a prayer or lead a responsive reading. So being in front of a crowd wasn't it, but obviously nothing like the crowd out here. But once you get out, you feel the energy. You draw it all in. You feel the people out there. The biggest thing you have to remember is to connect not just with these delegates, but connect with the people back at home.
All right. The next question, the more substantive one, is how on earth did Wisconsin become the center of the political universe? Your race in the recall.
Yeah.
Obviously the vice presidential candidate. A state that we think of as a blue state. It's been Democratic forever. What do the battles in Wisconsin tell us about what we can expect going forward?
Well, on the lighter side, it must have been something in the water, because Paul Ryan grew up in Janesville. I grew up 15 miles over in Delavan. Reince Priebus grew up 20 miles over from us in Kenosha. So there must have been something in the water in the 80s.
Yeah, and you are all in the same cohort, right?
Right. And we were all people who came into our own in terms of our political thought during President Reagan's end of his second term. But I think, seriously, beyond just that, you saw Paul and I and Reince, even though he's a political guy, really substantive-based, more policy-based than any RNC chair I've known before. All of us before the 2000 election said, hey, we're going to hone in and just talk about the economic and fiscal crisis we face in our state and in America. And we coordinated things from our U.S. Senate race to my race to the House of Representatives to both houses of the legislature. And we went from everything 2 years ago being Democrat to just about everything being Republican now.
It is a remarkable turnaround. And I couldn't help but notice yesterday, and I'm an astute observer of things like ovations in the convention halls, it sounded to me like you were nominated for president yesterday. You had a bigger ovation. I'm serious. You had a bigger ovation when you announced Wisconsin's results than even Governor Romney did in going over the top at 11:44 yesterday. And I'm wondering what you think is behind that. I mean, is it just the recall? Is it the achievements in your state, in a blue-leaning state, or is it even a sense of personality that here we got a guy that's got the message and got it done?
Oh, I think it's less about the personality. I think it's more about what we accomplished in Wisconsin and what it means for America. I think your first 2 points about the idea that people standing up in principle, following through on the promises they made in the campaign, and then in our case, doing it under really sustained pressure to back down, pressure to do something different. I think we did all that, and the fact that a lot of these people, not just people from my delegation from Wisconsin, but people from all across America sent in their $20 or their $30. Maybe some of them joined up with a volunteer phone bank. So many of the people who are here, even though they don't live in Wisconsin, feel like they had a role to play in that recall. And in winning, they think they send a message for November, that the hardworking taxpayers are going to be back in charge.
What's it going to take to get that same kind of energy and enthusiasm that we heard just in this hall for one state's governor behind your nominee?
Well, I think a little bit connects to another Wisconsin, another cheesehead. I think when Paul Ryan was selected, people asked me, what does it mean about Paul Ryan? I said, what it really says is not about Paul Ryan, it says about Mitt Romney. We knew he had the experience. We knew, as a governor, we knew in the Olympics, we knew in the private sector. In all those areas, he had the experience to become president. But when he picked Paul Ryan a few weeks ago in the USS Wisconsin, what he really told people in my state and across America is not only he had the experience and the skills, he's got the courage and the commitment, the passion to be an exceptional president. I think that's the sort of thing that both motivates the base, at the same time it appeals to a lot of swing voters.
All right, so when we're watching Wisconsin on election night, we're watching the results come in, what is going to be the county or the place to watch to know who's going to win the state of
I think
Wisconsin?
clearly, if you look at Rock County and Kenosha County, those are the bookends of Paul Ryan's congressional district. On the southern edge of Wisconsin, touches the Illinois border. Historically, Bill Clinton won that district. Barack Obama did 4 years ago. But Paul Ryan wins with more than 60% of the vote every year he's been in office since he first ran.
Right.
And those are blue-collar union workers who love Paul Ryan. And he doesn't hide from his issues. He's talked about it for years, and yet he gets almost 2/3 of the vote. If he eats into those votes in Janesville and Kenosha, he'll win.
We're holding you to these predictions.
Yes,
We're also going to
in
hold you
fact-
to this. Amy, do the honors, please. We're having our guests sign in.
This is a virtual guest book.
Very
Now,
nice.
I was going to ask you if you drew the state, and then you could put on the.
It's my hand.
All right,
That's
what do you think?
There you go.
All right,
Very
well done.
impressive.
Perfectly,
Excellent.
well done. Scott Walker, the governor of
you very
Wisconsin.
much
Good to be with
for
you.
coming
Thanks
by.
so much.
Great
And
to
now
see
we
you.
have Senator Rand Paul of Tennessee. Take a look.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Kentucky. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. When the Supreme Court upheld Obamacare, the first words out of my mouth were, I still think it's unconstitutional. The left-wing blogs were merciless. Even my wife said, can't you please just count to 10 before you speak? So I've had time to count to 10, and you know what? I still think it's unconstitutional. Do you think Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas have changed their mind? I think if James Madison himself, the father of the Constitution, were here today, he would agree with me. The whole damn thing is still unconstitutional. This debate is not new, and it's not over. Hamilton and Madison fought from the beginning about how the government would be limited by the enumerated powers. Madison was unequivocal. The powers of the federal government are few and defined. The power to tax and spend is restricted by the enumerated powers. So how do we fix this travesty of justice? There's only one option left. We have to have a new president. When I heard the current president say, "You didn't build that," I was first insulted, then I was angered, and then I was saddened that anyone in our country, much less the President of the United States, believes that roads create business success and not the other way around. Anyone who so fundamentally misunderstands American greatness is uniquely unqualified to lead this great nation. The great and abiding lesson of American history, particularly the Cold War, is that the engine of capitalism, the individual, is mightier than any collective. American inventiveness and desire to build developed because we were guaranteed the right to own our success. For most of our history, no one dared tell Americans, "You didn't build that." In Bowling Green, Kentucky, the Tang family owns the Great American Donut Shop. Their family fled war-torn Cambodia to come to this country. My kids and I love to eat donuts, so we go there frequently. The Tangs work long hours. Mrs. Tang told us that the family works through the night to make donuts. The Tang family have become valedictorians and national merit scholars. The Tangs from Cambodia are an American success story. So, Mr. President, don't you go telling the Tang family that they didn't build that. When you say they didn't build it, you insult each and every American who ever got up at the crack of dawn. You insult any American who ever put on overalls or a suit. You insult any American who ever studied late into the night to become a doctor or a lawyer. You insult the dishwasher, the cook, the waitress. You insult anyone who has ever dragged themselves out of bed to strive for something better for themselves and their children. My great-grandfather, like many, came to this country in search of the American dream. No sooner had he stepped off the boat than his father died. He arrived in Pittsburgh as a teenager with nothing, not a penny. He found the American dream, not great wealth, but a bit of property in a new land that gave him hope for his children. In America, as opposed to the old country, success was based on merit. Probably America's greatest asset was that for the first time, success was not based on who you were, but what you did. My grandfather would live to see his children become doctors and ministers, accountants and professors. He would even live to see one of his sons, a certain congressman from Texas, run for the presidency of the United States. Immigrants have flocked to our shores seeking freedom. Our forebears came full of hopes and dreams. So consistent and prevalent were these aspirations that they crystallized into a national yearning we call the American dream. No other country has a dream so inextricably associated with the spirit of its people. In 1982, an American sailor, John Mooney, wrote a letter to his parents that captures the essence of the American dream. He wrote, "Dear Mom and Dad, today we spotted a boat in the water and we rendered assistance. We picked up 65 Vietnamese refugees. As they approached the ship, they were all waving and trying as best they could to say, 'Hello, American sailor. Hello, freedom man.' It's hard to see a boat full of people like that and not get a lump somewhere between chin and belly button. And it really makes one proud and glad to be an American. It reminds us of all what America's been, a place a man or a woman can come to for freedom." Hung and Tuan Trin are brothers and friends of mine. They came to America on one of those leaky boats. They were attacked at sea by pirates. Their family's wealth was stolen. Tuan spent a year on a South Pacific island, existing on a cup of rice and water, until he was allowed to come to America. Now both of these men and their family are proud Americans. Hung owns his own business, and Tuan manages a large company. They are the American dream. So, Mr. President, don't go telling the Tring family you didn't build that. When the president says you didn't build that, he's flat out wrong. Businessmen and women did build that. Businessmen and women did earn their success. Without the success of American business, we wouldn't have any roads, bridges, or schools. Mr. President, you say the rich must pay their fair share, but when you seek to punish the rich, the jobs that are lost are those of the poor and the middle class. When you seek to punish Mr. ExxonMobil, you punish the secretary who owns ExxonMobil stock. When you block the Keystone Pipeline, you punish the welder who works on the pipeline. Our nation faces a crisis. America wavers. Unfortunately, we are one of a select group of countries whose debt now equals their gross domestic product. The Republic of Washington and Jefferson is now in danger of becoming the democracy of debt and despair. Our great nation is coming apart at the seams, and the president just seems to point fingers and blame others. President Obama's administration will add nearly $6 trillion to our national debt in just one term. And I'm hoping it's just one term. This explosion of debt is unconscionable and unsustainable. Mr. President, we will not let you bankrupt this great nation. Republicans and Democrats alike, though, must slay their sacred cows. Republicans must acknowledge that not every dollar spent on the military is necessary or well spent. Democrats.
That is Senator Rand Paul. I'm going to move him back to the state of Kentucky from the Tennessee place that I put him earlier. You can watch all the speeches on our iPad app.
State.
I should say, if you want to continue to watch the speeches, our iPad app has them live streaming. And we are joined by my friend, my dear, dear friend, and I'm proud to call him a colleague, as well. Sam Donaldson. Sam, Mr. Donaldson, sir, how are you?
Amy and Rick,
So
it's a pleasure.
Let's talk about these Paul forces. There's a lot of time dedicated to Ron Paul tonight when you consider the Rand Paul speech that's continuing behind us, the Ron Paul tribute video. Has Mitt Romney tamed those forces and brought them into his column yet?
Well, we'll see. I don't think he's tamed them completely, but this helps. I mean, Rand Paul, like his dad, is a fiery man, a fiery orator. Pretty good speech, right?
That's
I mean,
right.
he revs up. I mean, unless you hear somebody saying, well, this is wrong and that's wrong, you say, I'll march behind you. But he hasn't tamed them, no, because they march to a different drummer than even the new Republican Party.
That's right. And Rand Paul, there's a lot of talk in this hall and, of course, in Washington that this Ron Paul presidential campaign was a setup really for his son to keep the infrastructure there and the money there. Do we think that this is a guy who we could see in the mix in 2016?
Well, maybe so, but he's got Scott Walker, your previous guest, and Paul Ryan. I mean, those kinds of rising stars, I think, probably have more purchase at the moment than does Rand Paul.
And let's talk about the energy for Mitt Romney. Is this Mitt Romney's convention yet? Of course it's Mitt Romney's convention. He's going to be the nominee. But does he own this room? Does he own these forces?
Well, he certainly went a long way toward owning it by putting Paul Ryan on the ticket. I mean, I think he did that to make his base understand that I am a convert. Never mind all that stuff that I used to believe and all of this. I'm with you. But listen to the ovation here for Rand Paul. I'm sure Mitt Romney will get a bigger one, but I'm not so certain it will be as heartfelt.
Well, speaking of the applause line, Paul Ryan is really the guy that everybody here wants to hear from tonight. When has a vice presidential speech, besides the one we saw in 2008, we know that was one that everybody was waiting for, but when has that made a big difference, do you think, in any of these conventions?
Well, I don't think usually a vice president, Lyndon Johnson, of course, brought Kennedy to the presidency, but I don't think a vice president means much you in the sense of bringing people. Certainly, this vice presidential nominee wasn't chosen to bring more people. He was to solidify the base. He doesn't bring women necessarily at all. He doesn't bring Latin voters necessarily at all. And, the race is on to define him. Who is Paul Ryan? I mean, we know the junkies in Wisconsin, but the general public, Paul Ryan, what's that? Tonight he gets to say, this is who I am. This is where I came from. This is what I believe. You will like me. And, of course, the Democrats are busy demonizing him to say this guy will destroy the country.
But at the end of the day, no matter what voters make of him, they're still voting for Mitt Romney,
I think so. Just as last night, I thought it was a pretty good speech by his wife. But they're not going to vote for Ann Romney or vote against her. They're going to vote for her husband. And he's got to make the sale himself on Thursday night to the extent he can.
That's right. He has to fully take ownership of this party. And Sam, we've talked about conventions. What is the feel that you have in this room so far? How would you describe it? They'll get energetic at times, but is it?
No.
Are they fired up and ready to go?
They're not as fired up as I've seen conventions. Think Ronald Reagan, one of the premier conventions in which every delegate there was for that man, and they marched behind him and all of that. And I've seen some others too. Mitt Romney's our guy. They're going to be behind him. They want President Obama out so badly that even the people who don't trust Mitt Romney are going to work for him, in my view. And with Paul Ryan on the ticket, doubly so. But it's not his convention as Ronald Reagan commanded the stage, not by a long shot.
All right, Sam Donaldson, we thank you for being here. How many hours did we do together in 2008? Did you count? I lost count at about 100, I feel
Yes,
like.
and I tried to get the company to pay me $1 for each hour. And they said, you owe us.
How about that? All right,
Thank
Sam
you,
Donaldson,
Sam, very
our
much.
pleasure as always. We'll see you soon.
Rand Paul, of course, still behind us and still getting some cheers.
I think savvy of the campaign to use the Rand Paul moment to try to make the case against Obamacare, because that is something that this entire room can agree on.
Well,
there's no doubt that the people here agree that that Obamacare is something that's unconstitutional regardless of what the Supreme Court has said. They agree in this room.
Certainly. And, I think we saw this last night as well. The earlier speeches, the ones that are coming in the 7, 8, 9 o'clock hour, those are really aimed for the people in this room. They're very much red meat, base firing up kind of stuff. It's when you get to the 10 and the 11 o'clock hour that they're reaching beyond this place and on to the regular, to the average American who's watching this on television.
And speaking of this place, Amy, as you know, the Paul storyline was dominating all through the day yesterday and up until the evening session last night. And it took this kind of arrangement that they worked out with the Paul forces to put them out there and say, we're going to allow this speech by the next generation of Pauls. We're going to allow the tribute video by Congressman Ron Paul, because there were a lot of folks in this convention who were quite upset by the fact that there wasn't even a roll call vote for Ron Paul.
That's right. Well, this is only something that can happen and ABC and the internet and Yahoo all coming together to get on the same set. George Stephanopoulos
We've done
and
it many
Rick
times.
Santorum
Feels like Sunday morning,
sitting
doesn't
next to each other in chairs
Santorum
with
to
us.
the left of Stephanopoulos.
Right,
That's the unique. Okay. Check that box right
done.
there. I don't think that's
Now,
going to
do you
happen.
realize you're online? That's going to get taken out of
That's
context.
going to be big.
Going everywhere.
That's going to be big.
That's bad for you.
That's right. He's already ditching it. All right. So Senator Santorum, we'll start with you. You obviously had your time up there last night to talk to the crowd. Tell us where you think Paul Ryan needs to go to really connect with the folks out here.
Paul Ryan is the vision guy, and he has to be the vision guy. I was telling George off camera, and I know you never should talk off camera, leave it for the camera, but Paul Ryan's job is to chart the course. Mitt Romney's job is to get people to know him and like him. And if he spends all his time talking about public policy tomorrow night, he's missed an opportunity. He can do that anywhere. This is a chance where people are listening. They want to know who he is, not what he's going to do. Paul Ryan can tell us, I think, in even a more compelling way than Mitt Romney, because Paul Ryan is the ideas guy. And so this is his zone. He's the wonk. And he can do it because that's what he does. And Mitt needs to show that personal character issue.
And, to pick up on that, when you just saw those pictures of Paul Ryan you guys were showing right there, Paul Ryan looks and feels middle class. But what he's got to do tonight is show that his policies, and that's the theme of his speech, are going to strengthen the middle class. It's one of the biggest vulnerabilities, one of the biggest hurdles Mitt Romney has coming into this. Our latest ABC News Washington Post poll shows you ask, whose side do you think he's on? 58% say the wealthy, only 32, I think, say the middle class. That Paul Ryan's got to start to turn around that perception tonight.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, Senator Santorum, that was a key part of your appeal. I think a lot of people made a lot of social issues and all that, but there was a blue-collar appeal to your candidacy from the beginning.
I want to share a number. I don't know if you guys remember during election time, the exit polls were always wrong on our races.
It's totally true.
Yep.
Yes,
we do.
We do remember that. Yeah.
I remember in Mississippi and Alabama, Drudge ran at 6 o'clock. Romney wins Mississippi, leading in Alabama, because the exits had us like 12 points down in Mississippi, and we ended up winning both states. Well, we didn't do any polling. We had any money to do it. But I'm not a big believer in polls. I just go out there and do what I believe is the right thing to do. And but after the election, we met with the Romney campaign staff, and one of his pollsters, Neil Newhouse, is a good friend of mine and someone who used to do polling with me when I was in the Senate. He said, "I got to share with you something." And we went through this thing about the exit polls being wrong. He said, we kept seeing this, and we kept wondering, what the heck is going on? Why are these polls always wrong? So he started in the last few states asking two questions. Who are you going to vote for? And when are you planning to vote? And he showed me a poll from Pennsylvania before I got out of the race. If you were going to vote before noon, I was ahead by 4. If you were going to vote between noon and 5 o'clock, I was down by 5. If you were going to vote after 5, I was up by 21.
Guys are
People that are working.
Right. Yeah.
clocking
Yeah.
in. The guys are clocking in.
Guys are clocking in.
Yeah,
that's who I was voting. That's who were
Yeah.
voting for me. So I know everybody likes to say, it's the social issues. It's the guys who understand that someone's out there talking about them. And Paul can do that. That's what Paul. That's what Paul. That's what Paul needs to do. That's not what Romney needs to do. Now Romney doesn't need to talk about issues. He needs to talk about him. He needs to. I said to George, I said, if I were the Romney speechwriter, I would write something in that speech that is going to force him to get emotional.
That was so fascinating, because it's exactly we all know that Mitt Romney is reticent. That's part of his nature. But George H.W. Bush was reticent.
Yeah,
he had to show a lot about himself. He had to tell a lot of stories he didn't want to tell.
It's hard to do, and because you talk to the Romney people, they said he doesn't like to talk about him. So he doesn't like to, say good things about himself. And you don't have to say a good thing about himself. Just be vulnerable. Let us know who you are. Let us know what's ticking in there. And if you look back at the folks who didn't win elections in the last 20 years of the visual age of campaigns, it's stiff guys like Kerry and Gore and Dukakis, the guys who are the trash heap of if you will, of presidential candidates because they never let us know who they were.
But let's get to those guys who are clocking in, and it seems like that's what we're talking about, especially women who are clocking in. We hear a lot about now this gap that's opening up. It's white working class women and what they're looking for. Do you think it is, though, just to show his vulnerable side, or do they need to see as well where he connects with them in terms of their value set? I mean, one of the disconnects, I think, is that they see him as somebody who doesn't get them because of his wealth and his status in life. How does he do that?
But I think that's part of the story. I mean, it's not just any line that makes you cry. I lost my dog. I mean, that might help. But, it has to be something that does resonate with people. Say, yeah, I've been there. I understand that. I was where he was, and to see that I'm like him, and I'm not saying it needs to be devoid of policy. Obviously, it needs to talk about issues. And I think one of the issues, frankly, that has not been really present in this campaign is national security. I think I hang around a lot of married women because that's when you have kids, you hang around a lot of families, and you have a lot of women and who have kids, and that's a big concern out there, and I think there are issues that are out there on the horizon that if women voters were made aware of the risk of security to our country.
What are you talking about, Iran?
Yeah, I'm talking about everything from. I'm a great believer that missile defense is a big issue that is untapped. The START II treaty was a disaster for America, and the strategic advantage and the tactical advantage that now the Russians have, and the vulnerability of not developing a missile defense system with Iran and others developing a nuclear weapon. I mean, these are things people care about. I mean, they think the federal government isn't there to do everything, but they're there to do that. I mean, nobody says they're not there to do that.
Guys, if we could put this conversation on hold for just 30 seconds, our colleague John Carl is on the floor right now and just grabbed Senator Rand Paul. John, you want to tell us what you're hearing? We do, John.
We hear you.
Those Pauls are always interrupted.
Excellent. Rick, Amy, thank you very much. We're joined by Senator Rand Paul, who just, of course, spoke at the convention. How did it feel up there?
It's really exciting. I've given a lot of speeches, but it's a big crowd, and they're very boisterous, and it's hard to get your speech done because there's a lot of applause, which is a good problem to have, I guess.
Now, there's a lot of very loud Ron Paul supporters in this hall. What is your sense, honestly, how many of them are enthusiastic about Mitt Romney?
Well, I think it's a good thing that they're in the hall. They've come, they've participated. Many of the states, even the state party chairman now is a Ron Paul person. So I think that's good. I think they're being integrated into the party. The video they did in tribute to my dad was a really heartwarming and I think a really well-done video and a very nice thing for them to do.
There was obviously some bitterness or anger earlier this week when there was a dust-up over the rules. A lot of the Ron Paul supporters here thought that there was kind of a power grab by the Mitt Romney people. Do you see lingering bitterness from that? I still hear people complaining from time to time on the floor.
Not really. And when I tell people, I spoke to the Iowa delegation this morning, I tell them politics is messy and you don't win every time. In many ways, we got a lot of delegates with rarely getting a lot of votes. So I feel like we got represented very well. Our people worked very hard. We got a voice on the platform committee, and they did get to vote for their hero, Ron Paul. And it isn't always everything people want, but I tell the people you have more influence in the party than outside the party.
Okay, so what next for the Paul forces?
We'll see. We're hoping to help Governor Romney get elected, and we think the election's very important.
What about you? I mean, you were quite candid with me during the primaries. I imagine that.
That was somebody else. Couldn't have been me.
About your future. I mean, you see yourself as a presidential candidate 8 years down the road?
Oh, I think you're misquoting me now. No, I mean, I do see myself as part of the national debate. I don't know what that means. Being in the Senate is part of the national debate. That may be all. If that's all I do, I'm really pleased to have been able to do it. But there may be more. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what the future brings.
What is your father's advice on that score?
Well, when I called him up to ask him about running for the Senate, he was like, are you sure? he understands the give and take of family, what you know, the times you sometimes miss, but also the times you miss from your profession. We're both physicians. I do miss doing surgery. I still do some charity surgery around Kentucky, but I don't get to do it as often as I'd like.
The one thing I noticed was not really present in that video was a real theme, a major theme of your father's campaign, which was his opposition to the wars. Right. And there was a lot of talk about reducing spending and getting spending under control, and it's a message of his forever. But why no mention of his strong opposition to the war?
I think the video was actually done by his video production company, so a lot of the editing was done by his people, so I don't think it was intentional. And I really do, you think about it, did any other losing Republican presidential candidate get a tribute video? Right. I don't know that they did, so I think it was a special honor for the 30 years he's had in public service, and I think he will have a lasting influence. I also tell Republicans, we're not winning in California and we're not winning in New England. Maybe we ought to consider a Ron Paul type of Republican running in those places.
Or maybe a Rand Paul type of Republican.
Who knows? Who knows? We'll see.
But you had a message up there where you referred to Republicans need to understand that not all defense spending is good spending. Is that message getting through? I mean,
I think so. But the interesting thing is, it's picking up on both sides of the aisle. Senator Tom Coburn, who's a conservative Republican, has introduced Audit the Pentagon. I'm co-sponsoring it. We have 3 or 4 Democrats, but I think we've got 3 or 4 Republicans. So even Republicans do acknowledge it. I don't think people feel that that's too harsh to hear, but they do need to hear it, because the rumblings are out there, oh, we're going to have some military sequester cuts. And I'm like, I'm not voting to get rid of them unless you replace them with real cuts. We're not going to play this game of we're going to get rid of the cuts in 1 year and replace them with 10 years of cuts, make-believe cuts somewhere else. So I will play hardcore with this, and it's a message that has to be heard, and it's part of the ultimate compromise. The ultimate compromise needs to be Republicans have to slay their sacred cows, so do the Democrats. That's the only way we're going to ever balance the budget.
Okay, last question, and we'll let you go. Are you going to be out there campaigning for Mitt Romney?
Yes, they've asked me to go places, and I'm happy to, and we're just working on times and places.
All right, Senator Rand Paul, always great to talk to you. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Congrats on the speech.
Thank you.
All right, Rick and Amy, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Senator Santorum just learned on our air that he's not going to get a tribute video of our own, so we'll have to register the disappointment. But I do want to ask you.
No, I'm just hoping that you guys will put something together. And
we got plenty of people that know how to work on this whole
Shoshana was
video.
following me around for 2 years.
She's got like 76 hours of Rick Santorum.
I will say that I don't know of anybody that followed me around more than you guys did. You guys did a great job, and you know, one of the frustrating parts of being a also ran candidate, at least that's what we were considered when this campaign started, is that the media treats you that way, and they don't cover you. They don't. Now, sometimes that's a good thing.
Get away with more.
there's a lot of mistakes you made. I always felt bad about Rick Perry because he sort of parachuted in, and all of a sudden had to be ready.
Right.
And obviously, it's not as easy. It's one of those things. Don't try this at home.
Or it looks a lot easier.
It looks a lot easier than it is. Yeah. And a lot of town hall meetings in Iowa where I said a lot of really awkward, constructed sentences.
Well, you were able
that
to really
learned from.
You were able to catch lightning in a bottle. You hit it late. You had those organized supporters that went out there and surprised a lot of people. I think it fits into the Paul storyline that we have out there. Paul supporters are still fired up. Will Mitt Romney ever engender that same kind of passion, that same kind of enthusiasm, or does he just not need it? Maybe he doesn't need America to love him and to be ready to fight for him that way if they're just willing to defeat Obama.
Yeah, I think this is a different kind of election, and in many respects, not even sure that any candidate would engender more passion than Obama engenders in this room. And I say that even about myself, that maybe we would have had folks, even Ron Paul, well, I mean, there'd be a faction that would be more excited, but as far from the standpoint of the overall party, Barack Obama is the energizing force here, and it really wouldn't matter who else the candidate was.
All right, Senator Rick Santorum, thank you so much for joining us here. Really appreciate it.
We really do. Okay, quick question.
Are you going to ask me one of these stupid CNN questions like, Leno or Letterman? Or
Pennsylvania, yes or no? Romney wins Pennsylvania.
If Romney wins Pennsylvania, he has a big year. He has a big night.
Yeah,
I think that's
a very Okay, yes.
A slight
That's
dodge,
like
but we'll take
400
it.
electoral votes.
Well, I
Yes.
don't know about 400. No, I mean it's lower than that.
All right.
But he has a good night.
Senator
Thank you.
Santorum, thanks for being here. We are now seeing the man whose arena this was before, Senator John McCain.
It's an honor, as always, my fellow Republicans, to join you at our national convention and add my voice to yours as we nominate the next president of the United States, my friend, Governor Mitt Romney. You know, I had hopes once of addressing you under different circumstances. But our fellow Americans had another plan 4 years ago, and I accept their decision. I've been blessed for so long to play a role in our nation's affairs that I'm conscious only of the debt I owe America, and I thank you for the honor. When we nominate Mitt Romney, we do so with a greater purpose than winning an advantage for our party. We charge him with the care of a higher cause. His election represents the best hopes for our country and the world. It is said that this election will turn on domestic and economic issues. But what Mitt Romney knows and what we know is that the success at home also depends on our leadership in the world. It is our willingness to shape world events for the better that has kept us safe, increased our prosperity, preserved our liberty, and transformed human history. At our best, America has led. We have led by our example as a shining city on a hill. We have led at the direction of patriots from both parties. We have led shoulder to shoulder with steadfast friends and allies. We have led by giving voice to the voiceless, insisting that every human life has dignity, and aiding those brave souls who risk everything to secure the inalienable rights that are endowed to all by our Creator. We have led with generous hearts, moved by an abiding love of justice, to help others eradicate disease, lift themselves from poverty, live under laws of their own making, and determine their own destinies. We have led, when necessary, with the armed might of freedom's defenders. And always we have led from the front, never from behind. This is what makes America an exceptional nation. It's not just a matter of who we are, it's the record of what we have done. It is a responsibility that generation after generations of Americans has affirmed and carried forward. It is the cause that many Americans have sacrificed everything, absolutely everything, to defend, and when they've gone into battle, as they do today, they have done so with a conviction that the country that sent them there is worth their sacrifice, that it stands for something more than the sum of our individual interests. May God bless all who have served, all who serve today, as He has blessed us with their service. We are now being tested by an array of threats that are more complex, more numerous, and just as deeply and deadly as I can recall in my lifetime. We face a consequential choice, and make no mistake, it is a choice. We can choose to follow a declining path toward a future that is dimmer and more dangerous than our past. Or we can choose to reform our failing government, revitalize our ailing economy, and renew the foundations of our power and leadership in the world. That is what's at stake in this election. Unfortunately, For 4 years, we've drifted away from our proudest traditions of global leadership, traditions that are truly bipartisan. We've let the challenges we face both at home and abroad become much harder to solve. We can't afford to stay on that course any longer. We can't afford to cause our friends and allies from Latin America to Europe to Asia to the Middle East, and especially in Israel, a nation under existential threat, to doubt America's leadership. We can't afford to give governments in Russia and China a veto over.
All right, that's Senator John McCain. Of course, had a big night here about 4 years ago. We're joined now by David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, a guy who knows the numbers and the math just as well as anyone. And Paul Ryan has this reputation. He knows the numbers. I want to ask you, though, your take. Is he serious about addressing the fiscal situation of this country, or does he get a reputation just because he's a numbers guy?
No, he's serious, but the question is whether or not his proposal is realistic. I mean, there's no question that we're going to have to make real progress in 2013. And that means primarily through renegotiating the social insurance contract, reducing defense and other spending, and comprehensive tax reform that will generate more revenues. He recognizes a lot about the social insurance reforms and spending, but he hasn't recognized enough about the need to generate more revenues. And unfortunately, both parties are responsible for where we are, and we're going to have some revenues.
Just to the first point about a numbers guy, this guy has a lapel pin that says CPA on it. Not a lot of people walking around with those. All right, but let's talk about that then. We have a deficit clock up here ticking down. How much of the deficit, though, that's building up over the course of this conference is something that Republicans have some ownership of?
Well, let's be honest, okay? And when President George Walker Bush came into office, the debt clock was about $5.6 trillion. So it's gone from $5.6 trillion to about $16 trillion. You know what? This really lowballs the problem. Our Come Back America initiative have created a new clock that is the U.S. Financial Burden Barometer. We're going to unveil it when we start our National Fiscal Responsibility Bus Tour next Friday. It's going to start at over $70 trillion, and it's going up by 10 million a minute. And by the way, it's increased 50 trillion since 2000. So this is just a part of the problem, and we really need to make progress next year, irrespective of who the president is.
The one thing I also want to get at is this: we're talking a lot about this fiscal cliff issue, right? We got to handle a lot of these issues. Already becoming a campaign talking point about defense cuts, right? This is something that Congress said if we can't come up with a deal that's going to go deal with deficit reduction, we just are going to make across-the-board cuts in defense. Now you see, of course, this is becoming a wedge issue on the campaign trail. How does this get addressed? And are Republicans being honest when they make this attack on defense cuts when they knew what the options were when they didn't come to a deal?
Well, the truth is that you don't want all these tax cuts to expire, and you don't want all this defense and other spending to happen all at once. It would throw us into recession. That's correct. All right, but here's what's going to have to happen. Okay, we are going to have to reduce defense spending. And we can do it without compromising national security. I was on the Defense Business Board as an ex-officio member for over 8 years. The Pentagon is a bloated bureaucracy. We still have too many bases around the world. We still need to reform our contracting and compensation practices. I could go on and on. There's plenty of opportunities, but you have to do it in an intelligent way. And when you do it quickly and when you do it across the board, that's not an intelligent way.
So what happens with the fiscal cliff? Are we going to go off of it, or are they going to find something that they're going to get done after the election in the lame duck Congress?
It really depends on what happens in November. I mean, I think what we need to do is to allow some of these items to expire. We need to extend some and pay for them. But the big ticket items, the things like, the tax rates, the things like the across-the-board sequester, those are probably going to be deferred for about 9 months to a year combined with a commitment to do a grand bargain. We need to do a grand bargain next year. We can do a grand bargain next year, but that means tax reform, that means social insurance reforms, and you can't do that in a lame duck. Frankly, it would be irresponsible to do it.
But don't you think at the end of this election, whoever wins is going to say we have a mandate, and Republicans say we have a mandate, and that's that we cannot raise taxes. If Democrats win, they say we have a mandate, and that's that we have to let these tax cuts expire.
First, the American people are a lot smarter than a lot of politicians realize. They can handle the truth. When they see the truth, they know we've got serious problems, and they're willing to accept tough choices as long as they believe that it's fair. We're going to have to significantly reduce spending over time. We're going to have to negotiate the social insurance contract to save those programs, phase in those changes. We're going to have to engage in comprehensive tax reform, and we're going to have more revenues. And it's a new four-letter word in Washington. It's called math.
Math. We got our math lesson here from Dave Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for coming by. The
I'll see you in
CPA pin I
Charlotte.
like.
Have we gotten you a chance to doodle yet? Have we gotten you?
Absolutely. You got it right here. There you go.
All right.
Oh,
I've lived in too many states just to pick one.
That is an American flag.
That is an
That's
American
pretty good.
flag.
Did
That
you
is
get?
Yeah,
It
try
doesn't
to copy.
have all the stars on it. But
Try to copy
it's all
that
right.
signature.
It's a Dave
know?
Walker original. We love it. Thank
All
you
right,
so
take
much.
care.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Coming by. I didn't realize that we were going to have our first four-letter word on our broadcast. We didn't even have to bleep it.
That's
so
right.
that's pretty impressive.
Well played.
Very good.
All right, we're going to go now down to the convention floor where ABC's Cokie Roberts is joining us now. And Cokie, what is the mood down there? What is the sense? Who's gotten the biggest applause of the night?
Well, I think so far that would have to be Rand Paul, the Tea Party senator from Kentucky, and clearly he is part of this new generation and new big part of the Republican Party, and much excitement around him. Some of it, of course, because of his father, Ron Paul, but really I think for him as well. But this is a crowd that's just really waiting. They know that the big events are still to come, and they're being polite to their former nominee, John McCain, who's speaking now, but they really are waiting for the big guy, Paul Ryan, who they don't know, and are eager to see. And then, of course, Condoleezza Rice, the former Secretary of State, is always a huge crowd pleaser, and is also going to be speaking tonight. So this crowd is really just being a more polite crowd than often you see at conventions, but they really are just a crowd in waiting at the moment.
Cokie, are you surprised that there isn't more of a palpable energy, or are they just waiting to get excited about this Mitt Romney nomination?
I think no. I think they'll get very excited when Paul Ryan comes out here. I think you can expect all kinds of signs and hats and whistles and balloons or whatever to show their excitement. But I don't think it's right that this is a crowd that is all depressed or anything. That's just not the case. They're very willing to be up and roaring and ready to go, and they just need the right speakers to be in to do that for them, and that'll happen later tonight.
Good can triumph over evil. Cokie, thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait to hear some more of your reflections from down on the floor, and joining us here up on our studio, of course, is our good friend Matt Dowd. Matt, I don't know if you saw this. Rick Santorum was on here a couple minutes ago. He told us the key for Mitt Romney tomorrow night is he needs to show some vulnerability.
Be vulnerable.
Be vulnerable. What do you think? Is that the right message?
I don't know if being vulnerable is the right message. I think he knows.
Emotionally vulnerable. Right, you know what I mean. But
he could fall down and somebody has to help him up.
Exactly.
I think he has to show who he is. I just think all of this conversation about Mitt Romney, he can't walk away from the guy he is. And so whatever he has to do has to be authentic to who he is, because that's the most important thing for him.
And we should say on the floor behind us, John McCain just wrapped up. If you want to watch all the floor action, you can watch it on our iPad app at abcnews.com and our great ABC News iPad. And Matthew, does Mitt Romney own this convention yet? We've been sitting around waiting for a couple days. Now it's Wednesday night. and there still isn't any feel out there that this is Mitt Romney's party.
You know what? I was thinking about this today. What this reminds me of, having been worked on and been at a number of conventions on both sides of the aisle, this reminds me of a renomination of an incumbent. Is what it feels like. It doesn't feel like, oh, we got a new guy, the guy that's going to head the party. It doesn't remind you of Reagan in '80. It doesn't Bush in 2000. Where like this is the brand of the party. This is who we are. We're all behind it. It's as if he's been, and maybe it's because he's been running for so long.
Right.
It's as if he's gotten renominated. So I don't think you get that feel yet. Maybe tomorrow night you'll have it. Maybe you'll have it with Paul Ryan, as Koki said. It just feels like they think, oh, this is all done and all this, and we're nominating a guy that we already nominated.
Well, to be fair, do you think we're going to be saying the same thing a week from now in Charlotte? That after coming off of 2008 and the crowd was wild, they're going to be trying to fill a stadium this time instead of turning people away?
Well, that's actually a great question, because we may see both conventions and both parties, because each of these candidates has real vulnerabilities, and there's some suspicion in both parties about whether or not their candidate can win. And they've both lost some enthusiasm. Barack Obama has lost enthusiasm among younger voters, and as we all remember in Denver, that youth vote was what really got the vibe. We may see both conventions come away with, like, we both are nominees, but we're really not that enthusiastic about it.
No, that would be fascinating. Now, what about white working class voters? Sort of the same class of voters that Obama can't connect with, and that Mitt Romney can't connect with. Matt, you've said many times this is an election where neither candidate can win.
Yeah, they're both, in my view, they're both in their own way both unelectable, and they're both unelectable because of that group of voters. And if you think about the group of voters that's really going to decide this election ultimately, it are people that like Barack Obama, that don't like the direction of the country, that voted for Barack Obama, but they want to vote for a challenger, but they don't like Mitt Romney.
Right.
And so that group of voters is like, I don't know what to do. I one way this, I'm one way this. And I think that's been the problem so far at this convention. I have not heard, and I think Paul Ryan's speech and conversation, maybe the first chance that this really can happen, is who's connecting with that group of voters. Because it doesn't seem like neither major party candidate can make that sale.
Given what we've seen here tonight, we know that the debates are really the place where a lot of these folks are going to check in. Are we going to get a sense of the kind of debater that Paul Ryan's going to be when we see him on the stage tonight? I mean, is this going to give us any insight into how he's going to perform when he's standing back on a big stage on October 11th?
I think it'll give us a cue of how powerful his presence will be, and when you come to that level, when you play in the major leagues, you then convey some presence, and I think we'll learn that tonight. He could be more subtle, down to earth, not very powerful, and that we may see that at the debates, or he could come out as a powerful figure in some way because he rose, and that's what I think Q will get from it. He's never obviously debated Joe Biden at a level that he has, but we'll get that cue.
Matthew, do you think that this country's ready for an adult conversation on Medicare, on the big issues? Medicare has a long and storied history of being used by both sides in campaigns. Is there any sign in your mind that Paul Ryan's leadership can move it beyond that, and we can actually have this generational argument, Gen Xers maybe against their parents and grandparents, and actually engage on this in the substance?
Well, I actually think the voters out there would like that conversation and are not necessarily react in such fear that both sides seem to react in fear to this issue, just like Social Security. I think the voters are actually ahead of the leaders on this. But the problem is, as we've talked about before, if this is one, they want to have an adult conversation over the next 70 days, I don't think they want to have an adult conversation on Medicare. I think they'd rather have an adult conversation on where the economy's heading. So I think the voters are prepared for it, but I think right now the voters, tell me what the economic plan is and how you're going to do it.
Right. All right, Matt Dowd, thank you so much
Great
for joining us. Actually,
let's get one more question. Let's talk about Michigan. They're up there. They're out there. Is there any chance here? Mitt Romney's home state. I know it's your home state as well. Can Michigan possibly go?
Well, if Michigan, as I always say about a state like Michigan, if Michigan goes, then it doesn't matter.
Right.
So, and I don't think Michigan, I think they're going to play there for a while. We've all seen this. They play there, they act, but in the end, do they buy the last 6 weeks of advertising? I don't think they'll do it in Michigan.
So if God could come to you right now, and he could only tell you, or she, one state that Mitt Romney won, what state would you want that to be? Won or lost. So if you said, I want to know the outcome in one state, I'll give you the outcome in one state. What state would that be?
Virginia.
Oh, okay.
All right.
It used to be Ohio,
yeah,
but I get the
Ohio
sense
now.
I get the sense that Ohio is one of those states that they're maybe trying to put together an electoral coalition that doesn't include Ohio.
You know, we're actually going to take notes off of this whole conversation. You think you can just be a pundit and go out there and say we're going to keep score? So there we have it. Matthew Dowd, the very.
We'll have another conversation. I'll say Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now, our Jonathan Karl is out on the floor right now, and you've been catching up with John McCain as the day goes on. John, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I have. I talked to him. He just spoke, by the way, Rick, and I got to tell you, a little different than the reception he had 4 years ago. You may remember he was the nominee 4 years ago. So he actually knows what it's like to come out on that stage as the nominee for president, to be there, to go through the whole experience. So I spoke to him a few hours ago backstage here at the convention and asked him what is going through Mitt Romney's mind when he comes out tomorrow night on that stage. Take a listen.
The mind of the nominee when you walk out on the stage. And here you have, you know, maybe 40 million people
tell you
watching.
What goes through your mind.
Yeah.
Don't screw it up.
You get the sense that Romney's, you mentioned the increased confidence. Does he think he's going to win? I mean,
yeah, I sense a very great deal of confidence in him. A little bit, or some Reagan-esque qualities.
All right, so you don't hear a lot of people comparing Mitt Romney to Reagan, but I think specifically what McCain was talking about was the confidence, even when all hell is breaking loose on the campaign. Romney, McCain says, maintains a steadiness and a confidence that the campaign, that he will ultimately do well. And I got to say, Rick, I don't know about you, but talking to the Romney inner circle, the people who really spend time with Governor Romney, he does seem to maintain an incredible confidence, even in some of those worst and darkest weeks where everything has seemed to go wrong through the primaries, and he's had a few of those weeks, of course, since clinching the nomination, maintaining a sense of confidence. But it's interesting to get one more perspective from John McCain. Another thing about him, Rick, is that he has spoken at every Republican convention since 1984. And since '88, everyone, he's had a pretty significant speaking role in prime time. So few people have been up there as much as McCain. Rick?
You know, John, thanks, John. One thing I want to ask you, though, too, remember the last time John McCain gave a speech as big as this, he obviously was a nominee, but we also hadn't gone through the financial crisis. We were having a discussion about something about leadership and about who was able to be effective in that, who has experience, and then just a couple weeks later, the race completely changes. It kind of reminds you, right, that these conventions are important in setting the stage, but you have no control over what the next 69 days are going to hold.
Exactly, and he talked about that. You know, I asked him, did you ever at any point during the campaign lose confidence, that confidence that you say you've got to have, you've got to believe you're going to win? And he said that after the economy tanked, after the crisis, he still believed they could win. But he said he wasn't stupid. You know, he was watching the numbers. He was watching what was coming in, having frank conversations with his pollster, and seeing that they're 7-8 points down a week out, 2 weeks out. You know, you got to believe you can win. But after that, those external effects. The other thing he said is that yes, the economy tanked. I take responsibility for my loss. It was my fault. I thought it was kind of interesting.
There you go. All right. Jonathan Karl, our man on the floor, have a great time tonight. It looks like you're in the middle of the dancing and all of the assorted action.
He's a good dancer.
We'll see you break it down.
He's a very good dancer.
All right.
All right.
Well, joining us now, we have Olivia Knox from Yahoo News, and you brought us a prop.
I did.
All right, let me see. What is it?
I brought you a present, actually.
Oh.
It's this.
Wow.
What is that?
Exactly.
This is I know who it is, but
well, actually, will you put it over your face, and we'll start asking you tough questions about your Medicare plan and the like.
Well, so it's obviously a mask of Paul Ryan. I didn't poke out the eyes because I thought the Secret Service might take offense.
Yes.
But obviously, it's an improvement on that. There's a gentleman walking around the floor with a phone book thick stack of these, handing them out. They're going pretty fast. I've been stopped. I was stopped maybe a dozen times coming up here with this by people who asked me, "Ooh, where did you get Paul Ryan?" It's from a costume shop that's based in his native Wisconsin, and I have brought it here for you.
Oh, wow.
Wow, this is our first present.
It is, and it's also the biggest get of the campaign. I mean, if things get
That's
slow
true.
up here, we can always, go for it, Amy.
That's true, and I'll ask you questions.
Right. How might he answer?
That's true. That's true. It's debate prep.
Well
so,
done.
so Olivier, in a little bit, we're going to hear from former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice.
Right.
You obviously covered that administration
Right.
very closely, know a lot about her. Seems as if she's coming out. She's going to make a defense, certainly of Mitt Romney, but she's not pulling any punches, at least in the excerpts that we've seen, in terms of how she feels about the Obama administration
Right.
and their handling of foreign affairs.
That's right. It's very interesting to see Condoleezza Rice left Washington happily 4 years ago, and made no bones about the fact that she wasn't sad to leave it behind. And in recent months, she's really stepped up her profile in national politics. Not really electoral politics. She's not running for office, but she's been raising money. She's been making speeches to Republican groups all over the country. And tonight's kind of the culmination of that. She is going to take the stage, and she's going to hit the Obama administration on two main themes. One is policy, the other is principle. Policy, she's going to go after President Obama on things like Syria, his handling of the Syrian crisis. And then on principle, she's going to take up the mantle of an argument we've heard a lot from Mitt Romney, which is this idea that President Obama does not believe in American exceptionalism. And I would expect her also to make ample use of the Condoleezza Rice biography as well, telling some of her own stories on the stage.
And what does it say, Olivia, that she is the senior-most Bush administration official who's going to appear here? We're not going to see the president. We're not going to see the former vice president either. It is Condi Rice who still has this popularity.
That's right. It appears, at least from the scheduling here, that the problems in Iraq and other foreign policy issues haven't stuck to her quite as much as they've stuck to either George W. Bush or figures like Don Rumsfeld. And so she's still very, very popular with core Republicans, and she's going to make the most of it tonight.
Well, and it is interesting that this is a convention really that spotlighted, highlighted Tea Party, right? And the new blood that's in the Republican Party. She's the only member, really, of that Bush era to get up on stage. I know that the crowd here is going to like her. I know that some of the, as you said, it doesn't stick to her, some of the negative reactions. At the same time, is there a risk of Mitt Romney looking like he's hewing too closely to what the so-called Bush doctrine was?
Right. Well, in the excerpts that I've seen, at least, she's not mounting such a great big defense of the Bush era diplomacy, national security, foreign policy, except in the idea of an international prominence to the United States. But she's not going out there to say President Bush was right about Iraq, President Bush was right about this, President Bush. She's not making that argument.
Right.
Now, granted, if I'm the Obama campaign, I'm getting that press release ready right now to say, she was the national security advisor, she was the Secretary of State, and she was the public face of the United States overseas at a time when our foreign policy was rocky at best.
Right. All right. Olivier Knox, White House correspondent for Yahoo News and one of the punniest guys around on Twitter.
He is. You got to follow him on Twitter.
At O'Knox.
He is really, he's very funny.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Olivia. And I do want to stay on that for 1 second, Amy, because all that Condi Rice for VP stuff, you remember that? You remember when Drudge had hit after hit about Condi Rice, how Condi Rice was suddenly on the short list? Was there ever anything to that, do you think? I mean, even a slightest hint of a possibility?
I think there was zero possibility, but I think that she is so beloved by so many members of the Republican inner circle. We know that she went out to Utah to really was a big fundraising event, or a thank you to the big donors for the Romney campaign. They just loved her, and they really pushed, I think, the folks internally to give her a real look and to say,
exactly.
Get her to take a shot. All right. Joining us again, our friend from Univision, and I'm sorry that I saw you this morning. We didn't get a chance to catch up, but now
it was really
it was a really good one. So Mariana Atencio, right? Okay.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And, and oh yes, this is the new meeting. I should have set you guys up before. I'm sorry to say that. So we have a couple of speakers again tonight, speaking to the diversity of the Republican Party. You have Luis Fortunio of Puerto Rico, and then Susana Martinez from New Mexico. Now, Susana Martinez, though, takes a different approach on some of the immigration issues than Mitt Romney does. Can you talk a little bit about who she is and what do you think she represents when we're going forward now and looking at this next generation of leaders in the Republican Party?
Susana Martinez is definitely, one of those people that can really get out the vote for Latinos, I believe, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say. She's really, and also the female vote within the Latino community is extremely important. We talked about this yesterday. She said she was a Democrat, now turned Republican. I think that actually gives her a lot of credibility within the Latino community, and her story and her state are definitely, I think, one of the ones where they have handled the immigrants there better than, for example, Arizona, I would say. I also wanted to touch upon John McCain and the fact that he didn't mention really immigration at all.
Wait, did that surprise you at all?
I thought that he was, because he has really, been sort of the person to tell Mitt Romney, you have to reach out to Latinos. You have to try to get the Hispanic.
To do that? I mean, just to
I just thought maybe he was, Rick, I didn't think that he was going to be one paragraph, but maybe a one-liner just on, because he talked a lot about leadership, national security. I thought he was just going to, just put a one-liner in there. But of course, he has made such a turnaround in terms of the immigration issue that, maybe it was unrealistic to think that. But let's hear what Fortuño has to say as well. I covered the primary in Puerto Rico, and of course, people there, don't vote, but the Puerto Rican vote is very important in areas like Orlando, and that might help Mitt Romney take Florida, which is really crucial at this point for him.
Well, we were at a breakfast this morning that was sponsored by Univision and ABC and National Journal, where we talked to a lot of folks about the Latino vote, people who are very engaged on this issue, and there was talk about the threshold issue and the tone issue, and we had Ted Cruz on just a little while earlier, who said that Republicans can really relate to Latinos on the issues of family values, on the issues of entrepreneurship. Do you think that it's the tone that's keeping Latino voters away from Republicans? It's not because they're not getting the message that Republicans are trying to tell because they can't get past the tone that they've set.
I mean, the tone has really been, really to the extreme right, really harsh rhetoric, especially in terms of self-deportation, the essentially making life difficult for immigrants in this country, so they would have to, go back to failed states that made them, risk everything and come here in the first place. I think the tone has to be softened, definitely, and also, the immigration platform that we're seeing being presented this week, E-Verify, Arizona-style immigration bills, the border security, secure communities, has really been to the extreme right, even undermining the guest worker program that has been put forward.
So my question is, can they just turn it on? Can they just suddenly say, okay, we'll just start talking about the economy, start talking about Latino unemployment, and all of a sudden everything's going to be healed? Or are the scars of the primary season just too deep?
Latino employment is a great issue. Latino employment is at 10%. It's higher than the average national unemployment. I think that's an important issue because Latinos want to get jobs just like everyone else. But I think the tone in general has to be softened, especially in terms of immigration and the dreamers, these young kids, because everyone, and we talked about this yesterday, everyone in the Latino community, it's hard not to have a friend, a small business owner that that may be undocumented. So just the tone in general reflects something, and also the policies, because it has a little bit to do with the storytelling, but also with the policies being put forth. That since 2010, it just has been a 180 in regards to immigration.
Where do you think are the states that a few years ago we would not have said these are states that have a Latino population that could make a difference in this election? We always think about Texas and Florida, but we're hearing more and more about states in the Midwest.
It's really amazing.
Is there a place that you're looking for that we're going to look to it and say, wow, the Hispanic vote made a difference in a state that we traditionally don't think of as having a big Latino population?
Well, actually, I was part of a televised program that just focused on the census and those states that had, just a huge increase of Latino population, states like Colorado, even states like, for example, Minnesota, that you wouldn't necessarily think huge pockets of Latinos would be there. And looking forward to 5-10 years from now, imagine what it's going to be like.
All right, Mariana, thank you so much for being here. We'll check in with you throughout these conventions. It's terrific to see you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think, Amy, it's time for another flashback. What do you think? It's been a while since we went through memory lane. Let's take a look.
Tonight, with a full heart and deep gratitude for your trust, I accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States. I will campaign on behalf of the principles of our party, which lift America confidently into the future. 4 years ago, we raised a banner of bold colors, no pale pastels. We proclaimed a dream of an America that would be a shining city on a hill. In this springtime of hope, some lights seem eternal. America's is. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
Was Ronald Reagan's 1984 convention acceptance speech, one that I think Mitt Romney would love to be able to replicate. And we have joining us to talk about that, and of course all things political, of course Mayor Giuliani. Does he need to give that kind of speech tomorrow night?
Almost no one could give that kind of speech. Maybe Bill Clinton is the only other American politician of our generation that could give a speech as great as that. And I think even Bill Clinton was a notch below Ronald Reagan. It was just such a fabulously real ability to touch people. I think what Mitt Romney has to do is be Mitt Romney, not Ronald Reagan. I mean, Mitt Romney is an enormously successful businessman, a man who created a great business, not just a business, a man who did a great job with the Olympics at a time in which it was going to be canceled. He was able to save it. A man who was a very effective governor of Massachusetts. He's got real accomplishments that President Obama never had when he ran for president. He should talk about that, and he should talk about his plan for straightening out the economy. I think we're going to select Mitt Romney, not because he's, warm and fuzzier than Barack Obama, because he's more competent than Barack Obama, a lot more competent than Barack Obama. And that's what he should go with. He should go with his strength.
So I don't know if this counts as warm and fuzzy, but I have an enduring memory of in 2002 covering you when you came to Boston to campaign for Mitt Romney, went to a cannoli shop. And the shop owner offers you guys cannolis. Mitt Romney says, no thanks, and he pats his belly. And you, of course, grab the cannoli and dive right in. There's an element of politics that you can't teach. Does Mitt Romney have that piece of it that people look for there?
Yeah, but how important is that? I mean, what I'm really concerned about with a country with unemployment at 8.1, 8.2, 8.3% for the last, seems like forever, longer than ever before since the Depression, a country with more permanent unemployment than we've had since the Depression, with a president that's been a dreadful failure in guiding our economy. What I'm interested in is a president who can revive our economy, get us back to a growth economy. Mitt Romney can do that. Whether he can eat cannolis or not, that's another matter. But he can do that. So people have different strengths and weaknesses. I can eat cannolis, but I never could have created Bain Capital. So
maybe he has a lactose issue or something that we really didn't know about. But let's talk a little bit about Paul Ryan. Now, this is his first big appearance on the national stage.
I'm very excited about tonight.
And the next one is going to be a debate, right? That's the second time that Americans will get to see him, but probably the last time they'll see him on that kind of stage.
Right.
Tell me what you think in terms of his matchup against Joe Biden. What is that debate going to look like, do you think?
Well, I think this is a man that should not be underestimated. I mean, he's a very, very smart man. He has great knowledge of the budget, great knowledge of the economy. He's a very genuine, nice guy, very regular, nice guy. I think he's going to do very well, both in the speech tonight and then eventually in the debate.
Does he need to be a validator for Mitt Romney, or does he need to be the attack dog that goes out there and defends?
The same thing. He needs to be himself. Nobody should ever be forced into a role they're uncomfortable with. That's when they look strange in politics. When somebody tries to be, something they're not. Somebody who's not comfortable being an attack dog, you make him into when he looks silly.
Who's somebody who's done that recently? Where you
been a good attack dog?
No. Somebody who's done something that they're not comfortable with, and we say, you know what, if they had just stuck with who they were, that would have worked out much better?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, but I've seen it so often in politics. I hate to indict anybody with that.
Yeah.
But I've seen it often enough, and you've seen it, where somebody is told, oh, gosh, you got to try to be more charming or you got to try to be more human, and then they say something that sounds a little silly.
So where does national security fit into this debate? Obviously,
I thought John McCain's speech was enormously important.
Maybe the first time we've heard it really referenced it that explicitly.
I actually think, even given the fact that I thought Chris Christie and Mrs. Romney gave very good speeches last night, that was the most important speech we've heard so far.
Why is that?
Because he's talking about something that is kind of being passed over because the economy is in such bad shape. He's talking about President Obama's weakness in dealing with some of the major threats that face us. It's a substantial weakness, particularly with regard to Iran. We've got an Iranian government that is marching inexorably to becoming a nuclear power, and we have a president that wants to negotiate with them. They don't want to negotiate with him. His sanctions, I don't really think they're all that effective. I mean, he's given 20 exemptions to the sanctions, including China. It doesn't look like it's stopping Iran from moving toward becoming a nuclear power, and Iran's not afraid of him. I mean, Iran does not fear Barack Obama. Iran completely figures that Barack Obama is predictable. He's going to make noise. He's going to want to negotiate with him, but he'll never take any significant military action. So I think John McCain has to be listened to when he tells us that our national security is in jeopardy under the lack of leadership that this president has displayed.
But really, what more could a President Romney do to make Iran respect or fear the United States?
Exactly what President Reagan did that a President Carter wasn't able to do.
Which is what?
For a year and a half, they looked in President Carter's eyes and they figured this guy's not going to do much to us. The minute Ronald Reagan came into office, they released the hostage because this guy's going to bomb us. I think they have to be afraid of the President of the United States. Barack Obama is incapable of producing that kind of fear. The Secretary General of the UN went to Iran, to a conference in Iran. I'm sure this administration attempted to stop him, and basically the Secretary General just ignored the president. This president is not respected in the world. That's what a point that I think that Chris Christie was making last night. Much more important for a president to be respected than to be popular.
So you've got a long history with Mitt Romney, of course, facing off against him in the 2008 primaries. How has he changed as a candidate? I assume he's gotten better because he won this time where he didn't last time. You've seen this guy in action. How has he changed?
I think he's become a much better candidate. Everyone does. I mean, a losing campaign, you learn a lot from it. This is a much better organized campaign. I think his explanations and his policies are much sharper now. I think his whole approach to what he wants to do with the tax code, simplify it, would electrify our economy. I think what he wants to do with health care, to give people options to buy their own health insurance, will be enormously important. So I think he's done a very good job of explaining what he wants to accomplish. And he's going to give an important speech tomorrow night. I mean, that's going to go a long way, I think, to making the American people more comfortable with him. That's sort of the job he has to do. The way I look at it, with this undecided vote still looming out there and President Obama below 50%, the undecideds are undecided because they're not happy with the job that Barack Obama is doing. If you're happy with his job, you're voting for him. If you're undecided, you're questioning. They can be persuaded to vote for Mitt Romney if he and Paul Ryan do a good job of persuading them. If they don't, then who knows? They'll either stay home or they may vote for Barack Obama. So I think these polls, to me, say that Mitt Romney has a better chance of winning than Barack Obama if he can do the job of convincing them that he's a viable alternative.
And by viable, you mean it's the competence term more than the
I
compassion.
think that's what I would go with if I were running his campaign, and I'm not. I'd go with his strength. His strength is competence. Someone today in one interview I did said to me, "Well, Barack Obama, a young man, he said Barack Obama's very cool," and I said, "Well, you know something." If I needed brain surgery, I wouldn't want a cool doctor. I'd want a competent doctor.
And yet, at the same time, Democrats have spent a lot of money, and it's been effective, at least in terms of driving Mitt Romney's favorables way down,
and
saying that he's not, questioning that competence because they knew that was the strongest
what they've
thing
really
he had.
done is try to make him into a bad guy.
That's right.
They've tried to make him into. I mean, I believe the theory of their campaign is they can't win on their record. Barack Obama cannot run the kind of campaign Ronald Reagan ran in 1984 that you just showed, where he said, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Barack Obama asked that question, he's going to lose by 60%. I mean, 60-40. People are going to laugh at him. So what he's got to do, he's got to make Romney unacceptable. He has to make Romney into Dukakis or Goldwater. And Romney isn't. Romney is a very competent man, a very good man, but they have done some damage to him. There's no question about it. And it's going to be the job of our campaign to rehabilitate him. Present the real picture of Mitt Romney, like Bain Capital. They've spent millions trying to convince people that Romney did something wrong by making a fortune at Bain Capital. Gosh, I mean, that's one of the reasons I want him to be president. If he can do for America what he did for Bain Capital, we'd be in a lot better shape than we are with this ailing economy that we have.
From your neck of the woods, you mentioned Chris Christie last night. You said you thought it was a very important speech. How likely do you think it is that we're going to see him on the national stage in years to come, 2016, 2020?
I think it's very likely, but we don't know, right? I mean, all of this depends on, does Mitt Romney win? Is he in office for 8 years? I hope this doesn't happen, but does Barack Obama win re-election and is 2016 wide open again? Who knows? We'll know the answer to that better after this election. But this is going to be a man of consequence. I mean, he's been an enormously effective governor. I think he's just going to become more effective as the changes in New Jersey really take hold and we start to see even more improvements. But he's also competing with a terrific bench. I mean, I am very, very proud to be a Republican when I see all those great younger governors we have, like Governor Kasich, like Governor Walker, like Governor McDonald, like Governor Snyder. I mean, we've got some really, really effective governors. So he's got a lot of competition. On the other side, I don't think they have much on the bench. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking Charlie Crist, who's a Republican has-been, to speak at their convention. I mean, we drummed him out of the Republican Party. He's looking for a place to go. So they pick up Charlie Crist. Big deal. Come on.
And what about you? What's the next step for you politically? When are we going to see? I know you're going to get. They're going to be talking about anytime there's an open seat.
I don't know.
It's always about you.
I have no idea. I have no idea, and I'm very happy having no idea. I am very, very committed to making sure that, from my point of view, this election works out the right way and America moves in the right direction. I don't think we can stand. Our economy cannot stand 4 more years of Barack Obama. And like John McCain, I'm much more concerned about national security than the American people are, because I think Barack Obama has made us a significantly weaker country than we were when he took over. And no president should ever do that to this country. No president should ever make it weaker than when he took over.
All right, America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Now, you signed the iPad? Have you already put in here?
I did.
Yes. Well,
I did.
What did you write? This is like the Gettysburg Address.
No, just a little thing here.
What does
this
it say?
convention represents the hope that we can put America on the course of prosperity and growth.
Growth.
Oh.
You fit it in right there
Look
at the
that.
bottom.
I mean, this is the most. Really, you got the most words in that. I think it might not even fit on a tweet, but that was fantastic. You can have cannoli anytime you want. Right? That's a good.
Thank you, and I love that bracelet. I saw it poking through there.
My Yankee. I wear this even in Boston, which
Good
shows,
for you.
Which shows my courage.
Good for you.
And,
and
now in Tampa, a lot of people here get annoyed.
I know,
with
and this is a real race. You're a little bit worried.
I am. The Rays worry me, and the Orioles worry me. 2 great managers.
Yeah.
Madden and Showalter are fabulous managers, and we have Girardi, so it's going to be close, like the presidential race.
That's right. Another race that's going to dominate the summer and the fall. Rudy Giuliani, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Glad to see that.
Well, the bench is such a big story, Amy, to me, and I think I think Mayor Giuliani's right. There's Democrats just don't have the same kind of star power right now. Partly it's just being in the opposition.
It's exactly right.
It's easy to grow that bench when you're out there in the wilderness a little bit.
And for so long, this was a problem that Democrats had. It was a problem that Republicans had. When you're in the wilderness for a while, what you keep thinking is, I need to find the next Messiah, rather than I need to fill the pipeline. And Republicans have been able to fill the pipeline.
Speaking of wilderness, Cecilia Vega joins us. You've been braving the elements outside. You've been inside. You've been out there, talking about it. So what is this convention all about from your perspective? I mean, you've been talking to some really interesting characters.
It's about these characters. It's about the people we're seeing out here, really. These are the people that are going to be voting. These are the people that are going to take this message home and talk to their friends. And this is what their stories are all about, right? These stories, though, every day, I think they're getting crazier and crazier.
All right. Well, you really have the best story. I mean, you can't really make this stuff up. No. There was actually a proposal on the floor.
Here's the thing. I don't know about you guys, but I look down on this stage, and it doesn't really scream romance to me.
Really? Come on.
Just saying.
Look at that big.
We heard about
open
love
stage.
last night. It's all there.
It's like I know. It's like a match made in Republican heaven is what I'm calling it. So yeah, out on that stage earlier this morning, there was a young couple. They're from New York. It turns out they're both employees for the RNC. He gets up on the stage. He looks down at his girl. Before you know it, pops the question. It's all caught on camera.
I think we have
We've
a little
got
bit
it.
of it.
Let's watch. Because you can't talk about it. You got to see it.
Waiting for it.
Okay.
Waiting for it. Dirk. Dirk. I love you.
I love you too.
I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Please marry me.
Yes.
Will you marry me? I can't get it on.
Okay, I got a little teary.
She said yes.
I know.
got teary.
I got a little emotional. Listen,
these hard-hitting political reporters.
I know, right? They get a little bit teary. This is the sort of thing I wouldn't mind being proposed to at a political convention.
Watch out.
I guess it's more. I would like that a little bit more than the people who get proposed to on the hockey rink, or you know what I mean. So
she said, here's the deal with these guys. They've been dating for like 3 years. She said he bought the ring. She knew he was going to pop the question at some point, but they've been here for like 3 months working on this, and the way they talk about this experience, I mean, it's just grueling. These young staffers, they're working around the clock, and they work behind the scenes in production. So he gets up on the stage, and she kind of had an idea, but she didn't know it was actually going to happen at this time. And oh, there you go. You see him again. That she's completely dumbfounded, and she looks up and she sees this picture. There's their dog, and the picture of them kissing, and before you know it, he pops the question. He's on Winnie. Okay, so there's some interesting detail about their background. Listen to them talk about it right now.
Are you guys both Republicans?
Not going to answer that question. What do I like most about her? How easygoing she is, and how lovely she is, and how beautiful she is.
Thank you, Bradley.
You're welcome.
How'd you come up with the idea to do it this way?
That question has already been asked.
Will Mr. Romney be invited to the wedding?
Right here.
Will he pay for the wedding?
So it was a little tough to hear the reporters' questions, but the very first question the reporters asked, are you both Republicans? And they said, we're not going to answer that
comment.
question.
Wow. Yeah, how about that? So, Cecilia, tell us about the hats. You've been out there, and I'm just amazed by some of them. You know, we've been playing the delegate bingo game, and I tried some of them on, but it is just, I mean, this is 2012. Come on now.
Did you see the guy dressed as Abe Lincoln? He wins.
I met Wyatt Earp.
I met
tell
Wyatt
Abe.
Earp's mustache
Yeah.
fell off the other day on camera. And then there was the Kansas delegates had their ruby slippers on. Those were great. I just met a guy a few minutes ago dressed in like the most canary yellow suit you've ever seen from Georgia. But, you know, it's fun. They're having a good time. But they all have a serious message. They're all joking. I think they want to get noticed. And for us, look, it attracts the media to them. They're ready to talk into that microphone. And I'll tell you what, they've got serious things to say about their candidate.
That's exactly right.
It's the political equivalent. I keep going back to sports, but the people who show up at games with the painted face and the letters on their chest, that's what they do.
Do you know what the big question out there right now
What's
is?
that?
Who's the big mystery guest?
Oh, they won't want to talk about it. Clint Eastwood, a little speculation. We'll
Tim
find
Tebow.
out. Tim Tebow, another one out there. I think he may have a game tomorrow.
Yeah,
All right.
I think so too.
ABC Cecilia Vega, get back out there on the floor.
Hard
find
hitting.
out for us, will
I'm
you?
out there. See you guys.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. You know, I think it's fun. I mean, look, you can get out there, you can buy whatever merchandise you want, but it is about the energy that people bring to this. I think you're right. It's face painting types. They love this stuff.
Well, this is what they do. I mean, you know, you really have to really get in the mind of what it means to be a delegate. And we heard from a couple of them last night. But, you know, these are the folks that day after day, they're doing the grunt work. They're doing the non-glamorous stuff. They're knocking on doors. And this is their chance to really, the culmination, really, of all those hours of doing all the non-glamorous stuff.
That's right.
You know, and this is their time in the same way that it, you know, for an athlete that has been training and training and training, they get their one opportunity to come and show off their stuff. So it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. And so, you know, Rick, we've been talking a lot about different demographics out there. The president, of course, has been hoping to keep up with the young vote and get those voters out. He's been traveling today, actually, to college campuses in Iowa. He's going to Colorado, Virginia. And so we have with us today our MTV correspondent, Andrew Jenks, who's going to tell us a little bit about, you're now following this campaign full time, right?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about this youth vote and where it fits in this year, what it's going to look like, how it's different from 4 years back?
Sure. Well, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again. Yeah, it's been 2 years.
Yeah, it's been 2 years. I've traveled all over the country, and I've talked to a lot of young people, especially during the primaries in Ohio and Florida and Iowa. And I think the best way to describe it is kind of like a bad breakup, not necessarily with Barack Obama, but with government at large. I think young people feel really disenfranchised, disillusioned, and just having a tough time really believing in the system. And I remember actually when I was in Ohio, I was talking to a lot of different people my age, and it was Super Tuesday. And at a certain point, just so many millennials, so many people my age had no idea that it was even Super Tuesday, that we did a piece called "What Are You Doing Today?" And I'd go around and I'd ask people my age that, are really smart guys, young women, what's going on? And, like 20 of them in a row didn't even mention the primary that was going on.
You think it would have been different 4 years ago?
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
So what happened?
And I think it's sad. It's demoralizing, and I think what happened is that there was a lot of hope and belief, and that we can cross party lines and have a real discussion, whether it's liberal or conservative, about what's going on. And instead, it's just kind of the same old bickering and yelling, and that really turns young people off. I feel like we've grown up in a world of transparency. If I were to tell my friends today that I am in California, they would be like, "No, you're not. We see on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else that you're in Tampa Bay." And I think we seek that in our political leaders as well. An element of transparency, being real with us, and I feel like we really don't get that.
So what needs to happen for Republicans to get more of the youth vote? Because what we hear about is that there's a lack of enthusiasm for Obama, but not that there's movement toward Romney. So what are you seeing out there? I mean, is that true? First of all, that statement that it's really not, they're pro-Romney, they're just not as enthusiastic about Obama. And what does Romney need to do, though, to appeal to these voters?
Well, I mean, as you know, young people right now are really hurting in their back pockets. And we're leaving school $25,000 in debt. We're ending up back on our parents' couch. And I think, if I worked on Governor Romney's campaign, it would really be to continue to hammer home the message of him being a man of business, and that he can help entrepreneurs. And a lot of young people in this country see themselves as entrepreneurs. And when I travel around, most millennials don't really talk about being the next LeBron James or being the next Lady Gaga. They want to be the next Steve Jobs. And I think if somehow Governor Romney were to speak to them specifically, not just in kind of broad strokes about the economy, but real specifics about what he can do for them to grow a small business idea, I think they would really take that in, and they would come out in support of him, and not necessarily as some sort of just being against Obama.
So do you think, though, Mitt Romney has a real chance with this? With Paul Ryan, this Gen Xer, we've seen some excerpts from his speech tonight. He is going to talk about a generational challenge. It's almost like saying Barack Obama's that old man. He's 50. Hey, look at me. I'm a Gen Xer. Is there a chance that he can cut into the youth vote and get people energized, maybe on an issue like Medicare? Are people engaged in that?
No. I think,
all right, that's easy.
I mean, but to answer your question, I think that a lot of young people don't, and I've been talking to them in these halls, a lot of young people don't care that he's, 42 years old. They care about the issues. They care about being in debt. They care about student loans. They care about getting a job. So this idea that just because he's 42 years old and looks young is awfully short-sighted, and I don't think gives millennials enough respect or we're intelligent. We know what's going on, and just because a guy looks young doesn't mean we're going to vote for him.
Okay, but let's get to the heart of this matter. What Paul Ryan is saying is not simply that I'm your age, but what he's also saying is young people want to be told the truth, number one, and they're willing to take the tough, to make the tough calls to keep Medicare sustainable, right? They're willing to do the stuff that older generations aren't doing. You think that's true? You think 30-year-olds are saying, you know what, okay, I guess I'll be willing to take cuts in the government programs that I thought I was going to get because older people weren't doing it before me.
I think they can relate to that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is something that they could relate to. I think the most important thing, and maybe he's not able to do it in a speech like this, but when he goes around and visits college campuses, is making sense of that for young people. I don't think they necessarily know exactly what that means in 30 or 40 years.
You're not thinking about, oh boy, one day I'm going to be 65 and have to worry about
Of
these
course
things.
not. So I think when he goes around and visits campuses, I think that's something that's really important to communicate it, and for young people to really understand that. There's so much going on in our lives, and I think that, outside of a big speech like that will make a big difference.
What is it that you think is going to take to rekindle it? Is it just the economy, get people back to work, and then you can have trust in government? Or is it just, are we lost for a generation in terms of the actual trust in these institutions?
I think that there is an overall lack of trust in institutions. I think whether you look at it being government or Wall Street, or even, if you look at a lot of our political leaders, or even, sports athletes that we've looked up to, it's hard for us to really believe in these sorts of things anymore. But I do go back to this idea that I feel like we are kind of this generation cell. We are a big believer in entrepreneurs. I'm a filmmaker. I followed a young woman recently who had cancer, and she was going through chemo. And rather than when she got out of chemotherapy,
all right, we're gonna have to go to the floor again. Andrew Jenks from MTV. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you sign in on our iPad.
Will do.
On the way out.